Hello and welcome back. My name is Nathan House and I'm with the Church of Christ in Houston, California. And if you could like or subscribe to this video, that would be appreciated. We're going to be back in the book of Ruth in chapter 4 specifically. Before we do that, I kind of wanted to just show you guys this map that I think is very interesting. This is an ancient map. In fact, the oldest map of the Holy Land that exists. This dates to around 500 AD, slightly after that. And this was found in the floor of a Byzantine church. And this was in a huge map. I mean, 50 feet by 20 feet approximately. And they still have approximately 750,000 pieces of this ancient map that remain intact. It's a very interesting map. And again, its primary focus of the map was the city of Jerusalem, which is here to the left of the map. And you can see again this little wall, the wall that is running around the city of Jerusalem. But for the purpose of our time today, I want to draw your attention up here to the city called Bethlehem. And this is all written in Greek. And here's Ephrathah. So Bethlehem, Ephrathah. And here is this city of Bethlehem. This ancient map depicts this ancient city, which again, not a significant city as far as, there was nothing great about it in and of itself from a human's perspective, from a worldly perspective, a relatively small city. And it's also interesting just to kind of remind you that the time frame of the book of Ruth is the same as the time as the book of Judges. Ruth chapter 1, verse 1, we know that to be the case based off that text. So Ruth is occurring at the same time that Judges is occurring. Judges was a time of paganism. Very few people at this time seemed to be following Yahweh. They were following Canaanite gods. There was a lot of idolatry, immorality that was rampant in the nation of Israel. The city of Bethlehem is mentioned specifically in the book of Judges a few times, but mostly at the end of the book of Judges, you see the city of Bethlehem. And by that point in the book of Judges, Bethlehem seems to have really gone wrong. I mean, it seems to have been a very bad place, an immoral place, a wicked place. But when we're looking at the book of Ruth, the city of Bethlehem is prominent. It makes me believe that the book of Ruth is probably early in the time frame of the book of Judges, because once you get to the end of the book of Judges, things have gone so bad that I don't think that it matches up well with the book of Ruth. But in the time of the book of Ruth, what we'll see is people were still sitting at the city gates of Bethlehem, still calling upon the name of the Lord, recognizing Yahweh rather than perhaps Canaanite gods. And again, that's a little bit speculative of me based off of some of those points about Canaanite gods and are they in Bethlehem or not in time frame. But that is my take on that anyways. What I'm saying through all that is I think the book of Ruth occurs earlier in the period of the book of Judges. But let's go ahead and look then just at Micah chapter 5 verse 2. Why are we going there? Because it's interesting to note concerning the city of Bethlehem. Micah prophesies, "But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah," he says, "from you one who is going to come, who is from old, from ancient of days, one who is to be a ruler." And so the ancient Jews were looking for someone, a Messiah, a Christ, to come from Bethlehem. So the city of Bethlehem, of course, is significant to us as New Testament Christians, but it was a relatively insignificant city in ancient Israel. But the book of Ruth, this little ancient city of Bethlehem, it's actually quite prominent in the book of Ruth. And we will again look at the book of Ruth and just notice some things then that are occurring inside the city of Bethlehem. Let's look at Ruth chapter 1. We're not going to read this whole chapter, but Boaz, again, you need to go back and review the earlier videos if you're not familiar. Boaz, he has told Ruth in chapter 3 that he was going to see if he can redeem her. This aspect of redeeming comes from the book of Deuteronomy 25 and also Leviticus 25. So again, remember that number 25. Deuteronomy 25, if there was a woman who had become a widow, her family somebody from the family of the widow was supposed to redeem her. I should say that a little bit differently. Her husband's family, someone should redeem her. So again, notice this, Deuteronomy 25, "If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and he has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in and take her as his wife." So in Ruth's case, Ruth was a widow, but there was no brother to redeem her. So then this responsibility to redeem her would then go to the next closest kin. in the book of Ruth, there is one who was very close who should redeem Ruth. We will see that this one does not want to redeem Ruth, so Boaz becomes the redeemer. But if somebody does not want to redeem the wife, it says, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, pull off his sandal off his foot, and spit in his face. And the person who refused to redeem the wife, I don't want to marry her, I don't want that responsibility, I don't want to redeem her for whatever the reason, that person is now called in Israel the house of him who had his sandal pulled off. So there was a responsibility to redeem in ancient Israel. If there was a widow, the family, the closest relative should redeem her. There was also a responsibility to redeem not just the wife, but to redeem the land. So you were supposed to redeem the land if someone sold the land, lost the land. Leviticus 25:25. So that's kind of what's happening here in Ruth chapter 4. It's a fulfillment of Deuteronomy 25, Leviticus 25. So Boaz in the city gates, he comes, he's at the city gates. Here we are, the elders of the city. And it says, he asks this redeemer to come and sit down. And it says here in verse 3, let me come back here. Then he said to the redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you and say, buy it. So this, first of all, this aspect of redeemer is prominent. What is this one who is a redeemer? He is one who buys the property, buys the wife. So then this word buy is also prominent in here. He says, if you will buy the land, right? If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, the land, and I come after you. So Boaz says, I'm the next in line. If you don't want to buy the property, you don't want to redeem the property, let me know. This gentleman says, I'll redeem it. And then Boaz now, he hasn't told this man about the wife. He simply told him about the land. He was interested when it was the land, but now that the wife is involved, now that the widow is involved, he does not want to buy the land. The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the daughter-in-law, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. So then the guy says, I don't want to do that. I don't want to impair my own inheritance. I can't redeem it. So again, then the text moves on to this custom of removing the sandal. And so the sandal is removed. So then it says, the Redeemer then tells Boaz, buy it for yourself. So the sandal is taken off. Boaz says to the elders of the city of Bethlehem and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech. So Naomi's husband was Elimelech. He has also bought all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. So these were the wives of Naomi and Elimelech's marriage. So these were their sons that both had died. And I've also purchased Ruth to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. So here they say, we are witnesses to this. And then these people sitting at the city gates, they call upon the name of Yahweh to bless Boaz, to bless Ruth, to bless this lineage. And so again, as I mentioned when I began this, it's kind of interesting because the book of Judges shows us that many people in the time of Judges were rejecting Yahweh and turning to Canaanite gods. But here in this city at this time, that does not seem to be the case. And so they pray that the Lord will bless this woman, that the Lord will bless the offspring. And again, how interesting is this? That God may bless this offspring. Why is that interesting? We'll talk about that in a moment. So Boaz takes Ruth. She becomes his wife. He goes into her. And notice what the text says. The Lord, Yahweh, all capitals, right? So we know this is the name Yahweh, the covenant name. Yahweh gave her conception. She bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you, Naomi, this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. So all the people, the women, are now also calling upon the name of the Lord. He has blessed you. He, this child, shall be a restorer of life. Because you see, she had lost her husband, she had lost her children, but now there was someone to carry on her family, her name. May he be a restorer of life. I want to take you back to Ruth chapter 1. Look at Naomi's words. She's lost everything. She returns to the city of Bethlehem, and she's a broken woman. She's lost her husband. She's lost her 2 sons. And she says, don't call me Naomi. Naomi means pleasant. Don't call me Naomi, and I'll show you that. Naomi means pleasant. Don't call me that. Call me Mara. That means bitter. Don't call me pleasant. Call me bitter. Why should you call me bitter? Because the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full. Yahweh has brought me back empty. Why call me pleasant when Yahweh has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? How interesting, how sad that Naomi believes this to be the end of her story. You know, so many times we come to a hard part in our life, and if we're not careful, we may see this hard part as the defining moment in our life. How many times have people turned away from God? People have tragically taken their own lives because they see this bitterness, this horribleness, and this is all they can see. But you see, what is so amazing in this story is that was not her end. That was not her end. She went from pleasant Naomi to bitter Mara to being blessed by the Lord. You see, God had a plan. She didn't see the plan. She couldn't see the plan, but God did. And God was going to bless Naomi's offspring. From Naomi would be born, from Naomi's daughter-in-law. This was her lineage. This was her inheritance, if you will. This was how she was going to be redeemed, how she was going to be redeemed, how she was going to be renowned, how there was going to be a restorer of life and a nourisher for her. How is this going to happen? Through the offspring that the Lord would give through her daughter-in-law, Ruth. You see, from Ruth was going to be King David. King David was going to come from this tragic situation in the little city of Bethlehem. Was going to come the greatest king in the Israelite history. And ultimately, something much greater would come than just King David. And again, that's not to minimize King David, but King David was not the greatest of offsprings that would come from her family. You see, David did come from that family, from Ruth, right? Right here we see Ruth. Here comes King David, but someone much greater would come. One who would be called Jesus the Christ, who would be born in that same city of Bethlehem. How interesting it is that this little book, 4 chapters, occurring in a dark time in the history of Israel, how interesting that from this dark moment in the time of Israel, from a nothing little city, we are introduced to a city that becomes the home, the birthplace of Jesus Christ, Micah chapter 5, verse 2. And from that, we see the offspring that would bring King David and ultimately Jesus Christ. You see, God can take broken stories. God can take broken people like Naomi. God can take Ruth. She wasn't an Israelite. She wasn't a Jew. She was a Gentile. God can take Ruth and use her. God can take Naomi and use her. God can take, here's the point, God can take you and use you. Dark days, dark times, hardships, suffering, whatever they are, God can use you. Let God use you. Stick through God in the dark times, in those bitter moments, in those times where things aren't pleasant. Because on the end of that, you never know just how blessed you may become. Thank you for your time. God bless.